A woman adopted a quiet little girl she'd never met. But the moment she gave her a bath, she uncovered a horrifying truth hidden beneath her skin. What she found wasn't just dirt, it was a past filled with pain, secrets, and something much darker. Stay with us, because this story will shock you, break your heart, and restore your faith in courage. Margaret Hill never imagined her retirement would start like this, with a child she'd never met, standing barefoot in her hallway, staring up at her with wide, silent eyes. It had only been 2 weeks since she'd visited the local orphan outreach center. She wasn't planning to adopt. She'd gone to donate books, maybe volunteer for story hour. But the moment she stepped into the room, she noticed one little girl standing alone near a window in a filthy brown shirt and jeans, her tiny frame barely filling the fabric. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just watched. Her name was Nia. No last name, no birth records. Found alone near a warehouse district, dirty and afraid, unable or unwilling to speak. Margaret had been drawn to her instantly. Something about those big, broken eyes. That quiet way she looked around like she was trying to stay invisible. Margaret's heart cracked. She spoke to the staff, asked about Nia's history. No one knew much. Margaret asked to sit beside her. Nia didn't run, just blinked and shifted slightly. That same evening, the papers were signed. Margaret brought Nia home wrapped in a thick, soft cardigan. The child held onto the sleeve tightly, like it might vanish. She didn't speak during the drive. She barely blinked at the birds or trees passing by. Margaret tried gentle conversation, talked about her garden, the big fluffy cat named Oliver, the color of her bedroom walls, but Nia stayed silent. At home, Margaret showed her the room she'd prepared: lavender walls, a soft bed with moon-printed sheets, and a tiny bookshelf with picture books. Nia walked in slowly, turning her head like she'd never seen anything like it. That night, she didn't eat the soup Margaret made. She didn't even sit at the table. She stood by the wall as if waiting for instructions or punishment. When bedtime came, Margaret let her sleep how she wanted. Nia curled into a tight ball, clothes still on, no blanket pulled, and didn't make a sound. By the next morning, Margaret knew something wasn't right. Nia flinched at running water. She didn't like doors being closed. She didn't touch toys or respond to music. And she still hadn't spoken a single word. Margaret didn't push her, but she couldn't ignore the state of her clothes or the smell in her hair. The girl hadn't been properly cleaned in who knew how long. So Margaret decided to try a gentle bath. She ran the water warm and slow, added bubbles, placed 2 soft towels nearby, and set a little yellow duck beside the faucet. Then she knocked on Nia's door softly. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "would you like to come take a bath? Just warm water. I'll be right here with you." Nia hesitated, then slowly followed her into the bathroom. Margaret helped her remove her shirt, worn so thin it almost fell apart, and her jeans. Nia stood still, shoulders hunched. Margaret cupped water in her hand and gently poured it over her back. And that's when it happened. Nia screamed, a raw, painful sound that echoed off the tiled walls. She jumped back so hard she slipped, falling against the tub. Margaret rushed forward to catch her, but the child was already panicking, eyes wide, arms flailing, mouth open in a silent wail. Margaret froze not because of the scream, but because she saw it. As the water soaked into Nia's skin, it revealed what lay beneath the dirt. Long, pale scars, lines that curved over her back like ropes, circular marks across her arms, burns, bruises, layers of injuries that no child should ever carry. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Nia screamed again, now crouched and crying not just from fear but memory. Margaret grabbed the towel and wrapped her immediately, holding her against her chest as the girl trembled uncontrollably. "You're okay," Margaret whispered, voice shaking. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." But Nia didn't respond. She only clung tighter. That night, Margaret didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, heart racing. The scars weren't fresh, but they weren't ancient either. They looked like they'd been inflicted in waves over time. She thought of every article she'd read on child abuse, trafficking, and underground rings that used fake adoption channels. Could Nia have escaped one? She had to know more. The next day, she called the shelter. "What do you know about this girl?" she asked directly. A pause. "She came in late at night," the director replied. "Dropped off by a man who claimed he found her near a bus depot. We never located her family. There were no records." Margaret's voice tightened. "Did anyone do a medical exam? Did you even look under her clothes?" Silence. "Then, we were overwhelmed that week." She was quiet. Seemed stable. Margaret hung up. She stood in the hallway outside Nia's room, listening to the faint hum of the child's lullaby toy. Her fists clenched. Nia had not just been abandoned. She had been tortured. And someone had let it happen. Over the next few days, Margaret adjusted everything. She changed how she approached water. She introduced sponge baths gently using a cup instead of a faucet. She let Nia choose her own pajamas. She got rid of anything that made sudden noise. She took Nia to a trauma-informed pediatrician who confirmed her suspicions. "These are intentional injuries," the doctor said softly, "likely inflicted over time. She may not remember all of it, or more likely, she remembers too much." Margaret nodded slowly. Nia still hadn't spoken. Until one afternoon, while they were drawing at the kitchen table, Nia paused and looked up. "Hot," she whispered. Margaret looked over. Nia pointed to her own shoulder. "Hot water." Margaret swallowed hard. She set the crayon down and leaned closer. "Who did that to you, honey?" Nia's lip trembled. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small wooden stick burned at the tip, barely noticeable. Margaret stared at it and knew immediately this wasn't just about neglect. It was a warning, a sign. Someone had marked this child, and they might still be out there. Margaret stared at the scorched wooden stick in Nia's hand. It was small, maybe the size of a toothbrush, but its charred tip and crude edges made Margaret's blood run cold. "Where did you get this?" she asked gently, kneeling beside Nia. Nia didn't speak. She only pointed to the small cloth bag she'd brought from the shelter, something Margaret had assumed held only rags or a toy. She opened it slowly and found crumpled paper, a worn doll's button, and a single torn sketch of a woman's face with no mouth drawn in black pencil. But it was the paper that caught her breath. Partially burned, it read, "Hold her. Mark her. She is property." Margaret's stomach turned. Whoever had written this hadn't just abandoned Nia. They had branded her, treated her like an object, a possession. And maybe they were still out there. That night, after Nia had gone to sleep, Margaret sat at her kitchen table, her tea forgotten, the paper lit by a single lamp. She typed every word from a note into her search bar, scouring databases, old news articles, missing children registries. And then she found something. A raid report from 6 years ago. A farmhouse on the outskirts of a nearby town was shut down for suspected child trafficking. The case had stalled. No charges filed. But inside the police file, one image stood out. A shelf lined with hand-carved branding sticks, just like the one Nia had kept. Margaret's breath caught. She printed the article and tucked it into a folder. She knew what she had to do next. The following morning, she drove to the office of David Grant, a local journalist known for exposing abuse in government systems. "I need you to see something," she said. She laid out the paper, the stick, the image from the police file. David listened, took notes, frowned, and when Margaret told him about Nia's scars, the panic in the bathtub, the word hot, whispered in the dark, he sat back and said, "I'm going to write this story. But we need to be careful." Together, they contacted authorities. Margaret filed a report. Medical records were compiled. Photographs documented every scar. Nia's case, once forgotten, was now being reopened. Detectives came. Questions were asked. Margaret made sure Nia was never alone through any of it. But something remarkable began to happen. Nia, who had once barely spoken, started to answer. Not all at once, but piece by piece. "Red truck," she whispered one day. "Big man," she said another. She drew pictures of a room with a small window, of children lined up, of water poured too hot, of being told not to scream. Margaret held her every night, listened, wrote things down, and Nia kept going because she finally believed someone was listening. The investigation grew. 3 other children, now living in different cities, were identified as having similar scars. One recognized Nia's drawing of the stick. Another confirmed the same burned paper message. The man behind it had changed his name and relocated, but the case against him grew stronger by the day. One morning, as Margaret and Nia ate cereal at the kitchen table, the phone rang. "He's been arrested," the officer said. "Thanks to Nia's testimony, we finally had enough." Margaret turned to Nia, tears welling. "He can't hurt anyone anymore," she whispered. Nia just stared for a long moment, then quietly said, "Good." 3 months later, in a courtroom full of reporters and officers, Nia stood with Margaret at her side. The man didn't even look at her, but when the judge asked if anyone wished to speak, Nia lifted her hand. Margaret froze. Nia stepped forward. Her voice was soft but steady. "You called me property," she said, "but I'm not. I'm not yours. I belong to me, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Silence. Even the judge blinked hard. Margaret squeezed her hand. The verdict came moments later. Guilty on all counts. The day Margaret legally adopted Nia, the sun shone through the courthouse windows like a quiet blessing. Nia wore a blue dress. Her hair was braided and tied with yellow beads. She held Margaret's hand tightly as the judge signed the papers. "Do you understand what this means, Nia?" he asked. Nia smiled. "It means I'm free." That evening, back home, Nia stood in front of the small wooden box Margaret had mounted on her bedroom wall. Inside it sat the branding stick, but now beside it hung a crayon-written sign in bold letters. "I am not property. I am LOV count." If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more true, emotional, and powerful stories like this one. Have you ever witnessed a moment of unexpected kindness or courage? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read each and every one. And before you go, remember, no one is born to suffer in silence. Every child deserves love, safety, and a voice. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong.